And the walls kept tumbling down in the city that we love. Great clouds roll over the hills, bringing darkness for us.
Mi nombre es Norberto González. Yo nací en Havana, Cuba. Yo estoy muy orgulloso de ser a United States Marine.
Growing up in Cuba, it wasn't easy. It was very hard. It wasn't a lot of food, a lot of clothes, a lot of freedom. You can't say whatever you want to say. So when I was 18 years old, I decided to leave that place.
I'd rather be eaten by a shark than die in Cuba. You understand that?
In a lot of ways, Castro manufactures these immigration crises because it suits his needs. He's diabolical, but he's not dumb. And he sees the advantage of allowing people to leave.
I have to leave. There's no other way.
So life is pretty rough. Politically, there's a significant difference between what their constitution guarantees them in terms of rights and freedoms and what they actually receive.
The government controls everything. You cannot say whatever you want to say. You cannot express your feelings. You have to love Fidel Castro. You got to obey Fidel Castro. And if you don't do that, the police, they can beat you up. They can take you someplace, asking you questions and drill you till you break down or something like that, you know?
Of course, the Constitution says they have freedom of speech, freedom of religion. In reality, they have no such freedoms.
And freedom is no freedom whatsoever, you know?
And so life there, it continues to be one of grinding poverty and political oppression.
It's a big prison. That's what Cuba is, you know? So I decided to live, you know, so.
Throughout history, Cubans have come to the United States in search of a better life. Towards the end of the 19th century, Cubans, and especially musicians, began to settle in a place such as New Orleans in Louisiana. Cuban immigrants came in waves and began to establish their own communities. On the 8th of January in 1959, moved Fidel Castro with his followers to Havana, the capital of Cuba. He wanted to take over the dictatorship, and there was no resistance from anyone. The Cuban Revolution and the dictatorship of Fidel Castro made many Cubans unhappy. Fidel Castro introduced communism as a political statement. After Castro was in power of Cuba, a lot of things changed. The political opposition was eliminated. A communistic state was established. With the introducing of communism as a political ideology, the problems in Cuba went bigger and bigger. Cubans wanted to move to the United States and left Cuba. But the US felt threatened by Cuba and their communism, so they broke their relation. Because of that, Fidel Castro was approaching the Soviet Union. At this time, the USSR was in the middle of the Cold War with the US. Before 1958, there was no limit on how many Cubans could enter the US. They only had to follow normal immigration procedures. Unlike immigrants from other countries, Cubans were granted a special status which made it easier to gain residency. Cubans had been entering the United States on a continuous basis after Fidel Castro took over. But it was not until the summer of 1949 that the US experienced a huge wave of immigrants from Cuba. Almost 33,000 Cubans fled to the US due to the relations with the Soviet Union. Cuba was depending upon the Soviet Union for trade, but the country was put into a bad economic situation when the trade stopped. As a result, the government made a rationing system to deal with food, electricity, and gasoline shortages. The discontent among many Cubans continued to grow because they desired economic and political freedom. The most simple way to leave Cuba was by water. Cubans made boats out of old cars and big tires and went to the sea. A lot of Cubans were saved by US Navy boats, but 20% of the Cuban boat immigrants died at the ocean.